most prominent driver for adoption would still be necessity. And this is why we're seeing incredible adoption rate in places like Africa, in places like Latin America. In my personal life, I find people from North America and European countries the hardest orange pill because they simply don't see the need.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today we have a fantastic guest, Vivian, host of Life with Bitcoin. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for tuning in. And hey, if you don't mind, can you give us an intro and tell us about yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Vivian C, and I've been in the Bitcoin space for the past 3 years. So now I work in marketing, communications, and operations for Bitcoin companies. And then I'm also the host and producer of the Live with Bitcoin podcast, where we focus on the human side of Bitcoin by exploring the personal transformations through the lens of Bitcoin.
Nice. By the way, guys, in the comments down below, there will be all the links for Vivian and her amazing podcast. So please make sure to check it out. How have you got into crypto? What was your journey?
Well, I got lucky. Most people stumble upon cryptocurrency first, and then I stumbled upon Bitcoin first. In 2021, it was during pandemic, January, I was doing my master's in London in lockdown. So I was confined in this small dorm room doing my program. And of course, the course itself wouldn't occupy the entire time that I'm there. So I decided to basically I carried on my freelance practice to entertain myself during pandemic. And then I got hired on a Bitcoin role part-time without any prior experience or knowledge of Bitcoin. I got a Bitcoin job, and then through the job, I became a Bitcoiner because the job was very Bitcoin focused. So I went through this steep learning curve of the Bitcoin fundamentals, what is Bitcoin, and what it potentially means. And it took me a few months to make that turn. And then after that, I became a Bitcoiner on the job, and then basically have been working in the industry ever since. I am Bitcoin only, meaning that I'm very much focused on Bitcoin, either my personal philosophy, my investment, and then my line of work. And then now with the podcast, it's called Live with Bitcoin. So it's very, very Bitcoin centric and the whole lifestyle. So yeah, I got lucky to have stumbled upon the space with a job instead of coming from different directions from an investment perspective. My thing in Bitcoin would be the freedom aspect. Myself, I'm a freedom maximalist. I grew up being that, and for the longest time, I was trying my best to pursue freedom on different scales. And at the same time, I'm not a numbers person. I'm not a technical person. And before I got into Bitcoin, of course, we've all heard about it from one place or another, and then I always thought, oh, this is just for the nerds. This is not for me, and I never thought I had anything to do with it, just because I lived in a world where I didn't see any overlap between my world and Bitcoin's world. And then on the job, I started to learn more because I work in marketing. You have to really understand the product. You have to understand what you're doing to do a good job. So out of responsibility and curiosity, I started learning more about what is it. And then when I started to gain conviction was when I realized how it provides options for people, how it's a tool for us to achieve more freedom as individuals. I grew up as a kid feeling a little bit guilty. Like I belong to the one child policy generation. So I'm the only child in my family. And I remember avoiding news growing up because I would think, oh, these children from all the other not all the other, but some underdeveloped places, and they wouldn't have electricity and they wouldn't have water, and they're living in wartime, and I felt incredibly sad even at the time. I felt extremely privileged, and I thought to myself, what's the difference between me and them? And it's the mere difference is just I won the genetic lottery. Like I was born here in my shoes, in my family, where I have all this love and support provided for me from my family. And these people, they've done nothing wrong, and they've put into that situation where they barely had any choice. And then when I realized that Bitcoin helped people escape, help people opt out, giving people choice, giving people a vehicle where they can move towards more happiness and more freedom. And this is when I started to gain conviction. And this is when I started to really grow the footing and the root into the space.
There's definitely a lot of aspects. They also made me go, wow, I'm not going to lie, from my side, the main point of attraction was gains. I looked at this thing and I was like, holy, this is ripping. So I want to be invested into it, right? But then what happens is the more you are involved with the asset, I mean, that's at least what happened to me. The more you are involved with the asset, the more you want to understand why is it? What is it doing? Like, why is going up so much? Why is the best asset, performing as the best asset? So then from my side, what happened was the gain was just like the shiny thing who made me wanted to study. If you have been involved in crypto for a decent amount of time, maybe a couple of cycles, you have to be a maxi. There is no other way, because you will probably see everything else go to nothing, right? So in my mind, I have these things where I think, okay, I've seen the casino, the roulette, whatever you want to call it, but there's only one, number one, there's only one which has no CEO. There's only one truly decentralized. So at the end of the day, you cannot unsee this. And like you said, freedom aspect is super important. I didn't know what money was. I had no idea what money was. I thought having money on the bank was okay. I thought the bank had my money, So seeing this new channel, which is Bitcoin, coming in so aggressively and showing me the way was mind-blowing, to be honest.
I can attest to that because a lot of Bitcoiners who come on my show, and now they're full on maxis or very, very Bitcoin centric, and many of them have had this altcoin phase. And like I come from a very Bitcoin centric place, so I on a daily basis, I work with Bitcoiners and I talk to Bitcoiners, and a lot of them are Bitcoin maxis. A lot of my clients are Bitcoin maxis. And how in the Bitcoin space, we call all the altcoin coins, and that's including Ethereum. And so they a lot of them would say that they have gone through the coin phase, and they have gone through a period where they thought there's not much difference between Bitcoin and altcoin, and they were looking at the financial gain aspect and trying to figure out, oh, what are some of the use cases for these altcoins, and what are some of the utilities of these altcoins. And then what they realize after they got burned and after they've studied is that, just as Sailor would put it, there's no second best. And there's a lot of things that are just so different fundamentally between Bitcoin and all the other altcoins that made them realize, oh, I need to be Bitcoin only.
Yeah, super well said. I agree. I think for me, the main thing is the decentralization part of it. Proof of work, it's one thing. Proof of stake, it's another thing. Like, we already have proof of stake. This is what banks do. On the other hand, you have a product which is code, and it's law, and it's out there. It's decentralized. There is no CEO. You can't stop it. There is 21 million. Actually, there's not even 21. There's way less if you count all the other factors. But let's say 21 million for the sake of it. So, and in the end, when you put everything on the table and you see Pepe pumping 400%, if you are selling, it's because someone is buying. So someone is going to be left with 2 bags worth of nothing, and you made 400%, if you see what I mean. So looking into a karma perspective is not the greatest, right? Whether Bitcoin, on the other hand, if I sell my Bitcoin to someone else, I'm actually happy because they will have acquired something that has value.
Yeah, it's finding the eternity in the finite, right? Like, I love karma. This is perhaps one of my favorite topics to talk about, and I think about it all the time. Just how the universe work, and how the world bring us together and bring us apart, and things happen, the synchronicity and serendipity. Like, these are the things I think about all the time, and I think fundamentally that helps my understanding to become a Bitcoiner. And I actually got lucky there because I'm extremely lazy with money. Like, I growing up, I was bad at math and I struggled. I don't like looking at numbers. I only became analytical more so after I started working, just because you have to develop that skill to do your job well. But growing up, I was super kind of sentimental, and I'm very perceptive still till this day, which means by nature, I'm not going to be the best investor. I'm not going to be the best person to think about my personal finance. And for the longest time, I didn't have anything to save. Like I didn't have a stack to really think about it. And I'm really lucky to have stumbled upon Bitcoin in my 20s, pretty much at the very beginning of my career, so that now I'm set. Like now I have a focus, I know what I'm doing, and this is an industry I want to be in for a lifetime. And that's incredibly reassuring. And to be honest, if I were a number person looking into the financial aspect of things, I probably would have looked more into the whole cryptocurrency scene, just because the from previous bull markets, we're seeing like higher percentage folds from the altcoin space. And it's just because I am a lazy person when it comes to money. I want to have a safe haven where I know that if I keep stacking, I will be fine. And this is incredibly reassuring and a peace of mind for me to allocate my energy to things I actually enjoy doing, to work on something that I'm willing to build long term, being low time preference, adapting these values I'm acquiring or solidifying through Bitcoin. So it makes me more grounded, more so than ever, I would say. So the whole aspect of not savvy in personal finance actually saved me from being in cryptocurrency pretty much at all. And I'm not a researchy type per se. Like I'm very perceptive. I like looking at the big picture. I like looking at people. This is what I'm curious about, people, not white papers. So this is, I guess, there's a whole personality trait contribute to why I became a Bitcoiner so fast, so strong. And yeah, I just feel incredibly grateful and lucky to work in the space along with these amazing people, and including yourself.
Yeah, thank you. It's very kind. If you truly and deeply understand what Bitcoin is trying to accomplish, or I would say accomplished already, it's actually really hard not to FOMO into it, right? Like, I mean, besides the decentralization, the transparency, besides the fact that there is no one controlling it, I mean, it's the people's money, besides the fact that it's the most secure network on the planet. I mean, when you put all those things in line together, it's like, this is the best. I want to have as much as I can. And when I talk to people, they are kind of living normal lives, as I say, because I'm all in. I literally have next to no fiat on my bank account. You know, Bitcoin is everything I want, and I have. Everything I do gravitates toward that point. Hence why I moved to Dubai, because I wanted an ecosystem around me that is going to feed me what I wanted. I was talking to a friend last night. She's still in London. It's a good friend of mine. And she said, oh, finally, I decided to make an investment. I bought a property. And I'm like, that's a liability. It's not an asset. You know, if you buy a house and you live into it and you've done a mortgage, it is not an asset. So there is a fundamental problem with the education when it comes to finance.
I would actually counter that though. From the boomer generation, they buy real estate as a form of investment. This is like real estate was their form of store of value. I think as humans, we all need to achieve sense of securities, either both physically and mentally. And then on top of all these security, we can then later on talk about self-actualization. And if you are buying a place to live, and if this is something that you feel like, oh, I can only have if I have my own place, either I need to pay it off or not. If I have my own place where we're owning, then I'm in the right headspace to stack, or I'm in the right headspace to live. I think there's nothing wrong with that. You just need to be strategic of where you're doing it and why you're doing it, and you cannot do it from the perspective, and it wouldn't be smart to do it from the perspective of I'm buying my first place with much of the investment purpose in mind. Like I do see the point of owning a property. Maybe this is just from my own upbringing. And the way I was brought up and what I was seeing around me. But now the paradigm have shifted so much that investing in real estate as store of value may not be the best idea. And people, and myself included, I had very little understanding of what is money, partially because no one has ever talked to me about this, not at school, like nobody teaches you. And everybody's understanding of money in the fiat world is kind of distorted anyways. There's no one can give you a correct answer. So another aspect why I do appreciate Bitcoin is the fact that once you adapt certain lens, once you adapt the lens of Bitcoin, you really start to rethink pretty much all aspects in your life and think, how can I improve on top of that? Improve on top of this with the mindset of being low time preference, being living on the proof of work standard instead of proof of stake standard. And if people, when people ask me how do I distinguish, like how do I tell the difference or describe the difference between proof of work and proof of stake, and I would say that, imagine in a class and there are two students, and the proof of work person is the one who studies and really put in the hard work and get a good grades for their hard working and intelligence. And then the proof of stake person is the one who's getting good marks because he has great fancy stationery, which doesn't make any sense because it doesn't work like that. But this is how I understand the difference between proof of work and proof of stake, in a way that we cannot, it doesn't make sense, and it wouldn't be fair for those students to get good grades just because they have fancy stationaries.
Yeah, that makes sense. And by the way, I wasn't trying to say it's wrong, but there are two important aspects to consider. You don't actually own your house. That has to be said.
Depending on the place. That's
it
true.
is not yours, number one. Number two, if you do a 90% mortgage on a liability and you live into it, you know how much money is going to cost you? If you simply invest into
I would do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's insanity.
Exactly.
But that's what people do, because they think, oh, but you have to pay rent. Yeah, but there is a complete different. If you do the math, like take pen and paper and do the math for 20. Now there are mortgages in the UK, they pass on to your children's. If you buy a property to rent it out, that's an asset. I like that. But you don't live into it, because if it costs you money, it is not an asset, it's a liability. So when people are buying, they put down 10%, they do a 90% mortgage, the bank owns the property. And in the end, when you pay the mortgage, it's not yours. The government is going to allow you to own it. But wait until there is a problem, there is a war, there is something, they'll take it back. They want to build a road or something, they'll pay you in fiat. So I'm not saying it's not smart or is wrong. All I'm saying is there are better ways to maximize your investment and then buy real estate cash. Because at the end of the day...
That's true. That I agree. Because a few months ago, I was sitting in the bank having this exact conversation because I was trying to understand how mortgage work in general and how, like, what's the process. And I was sitting in the office and the manager was doing the math. And if you pay this much and if this is the term and this is the interest, and I was like, is this for real? Because you can just see the number on top of everything that's just keep going up, and then you're like, and then I was like, how about we reduce this and then we prolong this, and it's still quite a bit. And then you're right, like it's way better to have the money and buy it in cash and just have the peace of mind that this is paid off and I can do whatever I want with it, instead of having this basically sword on top of your head, waiting to ticking bomb in a way, waiting to go off. But I do, like, at some point I do see the need, or I do want to own a property, but you're right, like the current priority is to stack sats.
Exactly. And by the way, it doesn't have to be Bitcoin. It could be S&P, it could be gold, it could be any real asset, right, that you purchase. For example, I mean, without even considering everything else, which is why the bank has invented the mortgage in the first place. Society wants you to stay put, stay in one place and pay taxes. That's why the whole thing, I believe, is designed into. Because if you buy a house when you are 20 years old, think about 30 years mortgage. In 30 years, you will have a family. It's going to be too small. You'll have to remortgage it. The whole thing is designed to trick people in saying, oh, but you pay rent. Well, dude, if you do the math with a pen and paper, you will see how much they are ripping you off in the first place. Whether if you would invested your 10% that you have to put into it, you will have so much more cash in many other ways. Like I said, it doesn't have to be sats. I mean, even though that's what I do. It could be S&P, it could be anything, invest into business, whatever. Then with the money you have, you then purchase a property. And there is nothing, by the way, wrong either way. All I'm saying is, it's funny how I almost got trapped into it, because I thought, okay, I'm in London, I pay rent anyway, so why don't buy something? Because, that's how, especially in England, people, when you speak to young generations, their dream is to own a house, which they don't own in the end, but they think they own. So it's fascinating. As soon as you start opening the Pandora box and you look into it, it's like, wait a second. This is not how it should be.
If you think about why people say that, why their dream is to own a house, because I love to think about people's underlying motivations. This is what I think about all the time when people say something, or when people say they want something or dislike something. There's always something beneath that. So what does it mean that they say, "Oh, I want to own a house"? I think partially that means I want to have that stability. I want to have stability. I want to have space. I want to be quiet. I want to be uninterrupted, because now because there's so many people who are living in shared flats, especially in Europe. Shared flats. I just came back from Bitcoin Atlantis in Portugal, and I was in Europe for 6 weeks last year after Bitcoin Amsterdam, and I was living in these shared flats, and there's no living space, because you have someone living in all of the bedrooms, and then you have someone living in the living room. So everybody just have their one kind of confined space to themselves, which is nice. But at the same time, there's no peace, because there's always someone. And I think part of the reason why people say they want to buy a house is because they want that stability, so that their landlord cannot just tell them, "Oh, you have to go by 2 weeks, by the end of the 2 weeks." They don't have to live under that concern that they might be homeless in 2 weeks time. They want to have some space where they can relax just by themselves, have some peace and quiet, because it's their own property, and maybe they want a family to live in that house, and then they want to decorate it as they wish, because you can't really do anything with your rental property. I think there's all underlining needs underneath that wish of, "Oh, I want to have a house." And I think in a way Bitcoin helps achieve that, because it gives you the peace of mind that you are constantly saving, and then you're saving in a appreciating asset, so that meaning that over time the things you're consuming are become cheaper and cheaper, instead of in a fiat society it's all other way around, that you can work hard, you can work smart, but it's not going to really get you anywhere. It provides that mindset to grow a routine, to be low time preference, to adapt a lens where you are less affected by the chaotic situation in the society, and then you get a little bit more peace than other people. So I like to look at these underlining issues, and I feel really bad for our generation, to be honest. We had COVID, and then we have this economical turmoil that's happening, and it's yet to happen. We're at wartime, and the world's order it's shifting, and we just have no clue. Like, nobody has any clue, and we're just doing the best that we can. And I get why they want a house, but it's the wrong solution to get what they actually want.
For me, it's like a definition of a cage, right? So freedom is the ability to do whatever you want, go wherever you please. Like if you buy an asset, which is a liability in the end, if you live into it, you'll be taxed forever. You can't go anywhere, because at the end of the day, for example, if you look at my life, I lived in so many different countries. I moved a lot, and I traveled extensively. For pretty much half of my life, I lived in many, many places. That wouldn't be possible if I had a mortgage. Actually, I know people, they choose to buy a house and pay the mortgage instead of going on holidays. So their life is basically ruined. They can't afford anything because the mortgage is so expensive, and it goes up, by the way, shocker, interest rates. I mean, the bank has its own interest in lending you the money. So of course, and it's not going to get any better, sadly. And you will grow as an individual. You might have a partner, a family. So whatever piece of whatever you think you have, which you don't in the end, is not going to be even enough. And it's not liquid. It's not that you can sell it tomorrow. Like, you have to find someone who wants it. And if you decor to your preference, well, good luck in finding a buyer. Definitely. So the whole thing is designed to trap you in. It's the opposite of freedom. It's that illusion that make you think, oh, finally I have my own space. I can do what I want. Whether in fact, I think the ultimate form of freedom is real estate in cyberspace, which is Bitcoin. You can take it with you. It's divisible, it's portable, it's liquid. So there are so many interesting aspects of it, and you can go wherever you please, and it doesn't matter because the asset goes up in time, and everything else becomes cheaper. going back to what you said earlier, like if you look what happened even in the past 3 months, since January, we are up 70% almost. I mean, this is insane. There is no other asset who does that. Okay, maybe it's it's a specific case because of the ETF, whatever you want to label it. But I mean, we can't not look into these things, right? I mean, at this point, I feel being not exposed would be the risky part, right? Even just a tiny
Oh,
bit,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it will be 100% risky to not be at least looking into Bitcoin. And but this is an ego problem as well, or ego issue as well, because there's so many people have heard about it for many years at this point, and they've ignored it for so long, and now Bitcoin hit all-time high. To make the shift of start to learn about it, to start shifting their perception of Bitcoin, that takes some gut. Like that takes some letting go of the ego and say, oh, I was wrong about Bitcoin. And for that, some people are yet to come around.
We, let's say, as a species, as humans, we don't like new technologies. We always fight them. Electricity, cars, the internet, computers, everything there's always friction because there is ignorance. And like you said, people, and by the way, the Bitcoin white paper, which I'm going to link in the bloody comment down below, is 9 pages, guys. I mean, you can read it in your sleep. It's just so simple. And yet people don't get it. It's just fascinating.
I feel like we forget about how similar we are because we're all humans, and then we also forget about how different we are. And then we make wrong assumptions where, oh, they must be different from I am. And this is why we see so much conflicts in the world today, which is in my view a little bit unnecessary. We have more in common than we can possibly imagine. No matter your race, your gender, your circumstances, the fact that we're all humans, that says a lot about us collectively. But at the same time, we're so different because the upbringing's different. We all live through the lens of ourselves, and that's the only thing that we know. And that means different things, different perceptions, different concepts, different set of common sense. And then we forget about how we're all different. So Bitcoin can be very technical. Bitcoin can be quite tedious. And the fact that I didn't get into the space until I did was also partially because I never considered myself as a technical person. I wasn't into coding. I'm not a technologist per se, and I wasn't particularly interested in or obsessed with economics. And but this is the current set of Bitcoin content is about. Like they talk a lot about the macro environment. They talk about charts and they talk about price analysis. They talk about the ETFs, all these things. And there's so many people out there who have very little interest in these things. They're just naturally not gonna tune into these information because they're not interested in it. And let's face it, like if I'm not into something, I'm not going to invest 2 hours to sit down and have my full attention to sit through an interview to teach me what is an ETF, or what it means to have the Bitcoin ETF approved, or what it means to have a permissionless money system. And you have all these buzzwords like ledger and blockchain. It's very intimidating in a way, and people don't naturally go there. So that's partially what I'm doing with my podcast, Live with Bitcoin, is to approach Bitcoin content in a slightly different angle by focusing on the fact that we're all humans. And by focusing on the personal transformations of Bitcoiners, we can see that, oh, this subgroup of people called Bitcoiners, they seem to live a life where they are more connected somehow, they're more loved somehow, they're happier somehow, they're healthier somehow, freer. And I want to be that as a person. And if they got there through Bitcoin, maybe I should look into it. And I think I don't want to inspire people to look into Bitcoin from a fear perspective. I have my own doubt and skepticism when it comes to FOMO and fear-based marketing. I think it definitely works 100% for most people. But personally, I feel a little bit guilty when I guilt trip people, when I deploy the way of basically fear-based marketing. to have people look into something. I want to approach things in a more hopeful way, in a more positive way, by demonstrating and showcasing that with life with Bitcoin is indeed better. So that's basically what I'm doing in the space as an educator and content creator to demonstrate the hopeful side of Bitcoin.
This is such a good point, by the way. Technology is not there yet. I completely agree. It's really tricky. It's really hard. You have to self custody and write down those words, and I don't know what they mean. And if I store it on an exchange, it's not mine. It's really complicated. But at the same time, isn't that why it's an opportunity now? Because when you jump into something and it's, quote, early days, then you will have more return. It's still early days, right? Like, not many people. I have a couple of content creators, they go around and they ask people in the street, even in Dubai, say, hey, do you know what Bitcoin is? Would you rather have $100 or one Bitcoin? And people pick $100. So there is a lot of misconception outside. And I wanted to ask you, because you are super well plugged in with conferences and you travel a lot, you have a lot of people in your network. So I wonder, from your perspective, do you think, is it early still?
If we talk about awareness meaning, have you heard of Bitcoin? Then yes, 100%. At this point, average person everyday people would have heard about Bitcoin at this point. If they're somewhat on the internet, let's put it this way, or even if they're not, then it's starting to show up in newspapers with all the whole, and getting into more mainstream territory with the Bitcoin ETF. So awareness wise, it's quite good, but I would say adoption wise, we're still extremely early. And I recognize that I live in an echo chamber where I work with my network is very industry veteran, and they've been in the industry for 10 years, and I feel like a newbie, a rookie, even after 3 years actively working in the space. But this is my circle, and I fully recognize that most people, in terms of adoption, we're still very early, because it's still not necessary enough for us to adopt Bitcoin, especially in North America and Europe. I think the end of the day, the main driver, the most prominent driver for adoption would still be necessity. And this is why we're seeing incredible adoption rate in places like Africa, in places like Latin America. And in my personal life, I find people from North America and European countries the hardest orange pill, because they simply don't see the need. They said there's no use case because they have all the financial services around them. They have banks surrounded by them. I lived in the UK and I used Monzo at the time. It was so fast and so convenient. You don't even require a physical bank presence anymore, and their customer service was pretty good, I would say. And it's 100% digital. So if people are used to that and have that convenience all the time, then it's gonna be hard for them to shift the perspective to think in other people's shoes where it's not the case, where they don't have the access to the bank. And I remember the specific conversation with someone from Czech Republic, and he was questioning the utility, the use case of Bitcoin, and saying, countering my argument of, think about all these, like, let's say a village in Venezuela or Nigeria, where within that town you have to really go to hundreds of miles to go get to a bank. But he just simply didn't believe me. He didn't believe me. If he didn't believe me, I don't know what to say. So it's hard to wrap their head around in a different world how people can live differently. And I do believe adoption in the end happens through necessity. That's going to be the most prominent reason. That's going to be the hardest, I guess, castle to conquer. But once we're there, then we're not going to be far from accelerating adoption, hyper Bitcoinization. But it would also mean, sadly, that our economy has gone so backwards and so chaotic to the point that even on a large scale of things, people need Bitcoin as a necessity. Then it's a little bit scary to even think about that day, to be honest. But it's necessary. So in terms of adoption, we're extremely early. We need more everyday people to come on to the Bitcoin standard. and understand what it means on a grand scheme of things beyond the financial aspect. And this is another reason why I'm a little bit skeptical about emphasizing too much on the price factor of Bitcoin, because then it's almost like you're missing the big picture. You're mixing Bitcoin, you're mixing the term, or mixing what people care about in Bitcoin and crypto, and then you're subconsciously putting them on the same shelf, versus if you just look at what it is and what it means on a humanity level, then the big picture is really not the it's way way beyond the financial aspect of it.
Yeah, that's super well said. I also think it's funny because I think once you look into Bitcoin, it's gonna make you revalue everything else. Like I talk to people on a regular basis, and they say to me, "Well, you don't trust the government, you don't trust the banks, you don't trust the pharma." I was like, "Guys, no, hello. I mean, not to be a conspiracy theorist guy, but no, hell no, I don't trust any of those people. I mean." Not because they are evil, even though we could debate that, but because the whole thing is designed to make money. Like the whole thing is designed to make money off people. So Bitcoin is going to empower you to leave the matrix, right? Just to unplug from everything. But like you said, you will have to digest a lot of changes, right? And if you are someone who's trustworthy, if you are someone who has a mortgage, loves their bank, and there is a lot of people. I mean, at the end of the day, banks and government have been marketing everything for years. So if you want to fight them, it's not going to be an easy win. I see Bitcoin as a tool to make me free from everything. I don't need, like you said, besides the fact that there are places where inflation is major problem, right? So let's not go there for a sec, but let's talk about freedom and personal choices. I can take my Bitcoin with me in the grave and nobody can take it off me if stored properly. Anything else, I would argue, is not possible. I mean, you don't actually own anything else. Like someone else has custody of it, or they let you borrow it, like real estate. The government actually is okay for you to have it, but it's not yours in the end. Gold, I mean, where do you store it? I mean, yeah, you can store it in your flat, but they can come in and steal it. So at the end of the day, what is the only thing on the planet you can actually truly own? Well, it's Bitcoin, in my view, my perspective. Then once you open down that rabbit hole, you go, holy, everything else is an illusion, like money is fake, is losing value, is devaluing itself. They just can't print them, ever since the 70s, we took off the gold standard. So now they can just print as many as they want. My life goes up in price. Like if you look back into, and you don't even have to go back that long, 20, 50 years ago, check how much a coffee was costing you and check it now. So, but again, like you said, people are probably not asking enough questions. And this is the most exciting thing for me about Bitcoin is allow me to ask questions about stuff, about right. What is money? How do I want to preserve my value? What is that I really own? And every time I answer a deep question, Bitcoin keeps coming back and say, I fixed this. I fixed this. I fixed this.
Yeah, it's definitely a mindset shift where you adopt certain lens and things start to... There's a pitfall, though. There's a pitfall of the Bitcoin mindset, because I myself also see a lot of Bitcoiners are placing Bitcoin in the center of their lives, and their whole life purpose is about stack sats and accumulate as much as Bitcoin as possible, which is, there was nothing wrong with it, and I applaud to that, and I am like that. But there's also a risk of, if you are being so focused and develop, there's a risk of developing a tunnel vision, and then when your life is all about stacking sats, there's a chance that you are slacking off in other areas in your life. And this is why I'm so happy to see in the past couple of years there's the chatter gone on Bitcoin Twitter in general, in the Bitcoin community in general, about diet, about how do we take care of ourselves physically and mentally. There's more and more of these discussions start to emerge on top of why Bitcoin, and why Bitcoin not crypto, and why Bitcoin it's necessary for humanity in general. And we set aside of whether these diets are beneficial, where I don't want to go there, but the fact that people are merely thinking about it among the Bitcoin community, meaning that we are putting more emphasis on living lives as individuals, we're realizing more and more so that Bitcoin is the vehicle. It might be the tool for us to get to a life where there's more freedom and happiness, but it will still be up to us to walk that path. And Bitcoin is the vehicle and not the destination. And more people, including Bitcoiners, are still yet to realize that.
Fix the money, fix the world. Like I see as Bitcoin is that shuttle who's going to take you off Earth. And you have to go through some pressure, put the fuel in, put the rocket in place and go through whatever, all the atmospheres. And then boom, you are in space and it's like, oof, now I can chill. And I think you need that phase, like you said. But I agree with you, it can't be healthy. It has to be like the Chinese Tao, you have yin and yang and they kind of live together. And I think the phase that most people have maybe go through in the beginning especially is the kind of power vision to give you the strength to go through and punch through these whatever it is we build. Exactly. And then once it's smashed into pieces, then you can just, like you said, okay, now that I've done all my work and everything, I can just now that I understand the importance of all those things, I can just let it go and live a little bit more. I agree. I think balance is everything because I'm a big fan of phases. You have to go through certain phases to get to certain points. But at the same time, like you said, it's also really important to, touch some grass, as we say.
Yeah.
Right? But Vivian, thank you so much. I mean, is there anything else you would like to talk about or cover today?
Well, thanks for having me first. And then the second thing, I guess, is don't forget to live your life. You can be into Bitcoin, you can be into crypto, but at the end of the day, we're all humans living our lives, try to be our best self. We're all people that crave community, crave connection, freedom, happiness. And even though sometimes we don't admit it or we don't realize that, but fundamentally we are that. So don't forget to live your life while this world is burning to the ground and rebuilding itself, and be a part of that change. If you are looking for a change, if like the pinned tweet on my Twitter is that don't wait for the wind, be the wind. And this is true for so many contexts, and this is what I tell myself all the time. If I want something to happen in my life, actively go after it. Try not to make excuses, try to break them down into actionable steps, make realistic goals, and stick to the plan. Oftentimes, consistency and focus are things that will help us get to where we want, even if that's not right away. But the journey itself, in the end, will matter the most. And then the last thing, I guess, is to please check out my podcast called Life with Bitcoin. We don't talk about technical analysis. We don't talk about price. If we have, women on the show, we talk about relationship. We talk about pregnancy, parenting. We talk to people who have unique life experiences who are also Bitcoiners to chat through their personal transformations, their struggles, their success. Where have they learned? Where have they failed? What would have they done differently? So these are the things that will apply to us all. I've learned tremendous wisdom and great stories from my guests, and I hope that you will enjoy too.
Of course, in the comment down below, I will link all your social media and, of course, your beautiful podcast. Guys, check it out. It is incredible. I actually love it. I've been watching it. Please keep producing those beautiful episodes. I love the different lens you have on the matter. Like you said, there is a bunch of different people producing a bunch of different contents. Some people are more technical. Other people maybe talk about fundamentals. I love your take. Hence why I reached out on Twitter, and I'm really glad you said yes. And I can say, 你是我的好朋友.
Oh, wow. 你是我的好朋友.
Thank you so much, Vivian. You've been an absolute legend. So super glad you joined the show today. Thank you so much. And guys, thank you so much for watching. See you on the next one.